Hi, Stacy Savage. I am Gerrie Spellmann here with you on our podcast, Love, Sweat, and Tears. And so we are so excited about you joining us today. We're going to be, the title of our podcast is Zero Waste, Real Impact, Helping Schools Redirect Waste into What Matters Most. And that speaks to me because I was a principal, and I don't know if you know that, Stacy, of an elementary school. I'm recently retired, 1 year retirement. And I had a student advisory group committee of students that wanted to always give me feedback. And I want you to know one of the things that really bothered them was how much waste we had specifically in our cafeteria and weren't able to do much about it. So I know we're probably going to talk about that, but let's get to know a little bit about you. Who is Stacy Savage?
It's a long story. Well, I grew up in Southeast Texas. So
Okay.
think, brown hazy skies, rotten egg smells, Texas oil and gas industry. My mom and dad both worked at oil and gas refineries for a collective 75 years, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. That's really the major lucrative industry where you could actually put 3 kids through college and save up for a pension and retirement, So there's not really much else in that area. So, there's a lot of just kind of keep your head down, don't rock the boat mentality down there. And so, the oil and gas industry really does have a stranglehold on the Texas legislature as well as the entire region's economy. And so, people are just happy to have the work, even though there are a lot of pollution issues in that area. And so you don't blame the workers. They're there trying to make a living and raise their families. It's really the systems that started coming to light whenever I was getting older in the area. And before I moved away to college, I went up to UT in Dallas and was a dance teacher and choreographer for many, many years. And then I moved down to Austin, and I found this beautiful oasis of nature that I never knew existed. So, and Austin, the only reason I was able to move down to Austin is because I was a waitress and I was able to move to a different store from Dallas to Austin. And so I was able to make that transfer. And, I was slinging fajitas and margaritas for a good decade where I picked up the gift of gab and learned how to talk to people from all walks of life on kind of any subject. And that really served me well because I was approached to be a manager of this restaurant. And I was like, oh no, there's something much bigger for me out there. And I know that I want to have something to do with the environment. And so I found a job, and on the back of the Austin Chronicle, which is the local circular down here, there was an ad in the back of the newspaper that said, "Get paid to fight the man." And I was like, cool. But wait,
That
who's the
piqued your
man?
interest. Yeah, you're like,
It sounded cool, but I was like, who's the man? I don't know. Totally, politically uneducated, did not come from a political household, had no idea about, really like, I voted, but I didn't necessarily have any real world education around these political issues like social injustice, environmental protections. There's all sorts of things that those weren't dinner table conversations for us. And so it was a big learning curve for me, for sure, because that job turned out to be door-to-door grassroots community organizing. And it was an empowering position for me to be able to knock on doors all across Texas to talk to everyday Texans, just like you and me, just everyday people, about pollution issues, about government accountability, corporate polluters in the local area or across the state, what happens at the state legislature, how people can get involved at the local level. And it was really empowering to me to empower other people. And so during my work doing door-to-door organizing for about a decade, I was able to kind of move up through the ranks, and I became the director as well as the program manager. And so we were able to work with our allies to pull together some pretty key pieces of legislation that passed. In 2007, we worked with Dell to pass the computer take back law, and we repeated that victory. And and it's important to note that that law with Dell gained 100% passage rate. Not one lawmaker in all 181 districts across the state of Texas voted against it. So it was a producer take back law where the producers like Dell and HP and the other companies, Apple, would have to take back their products from everyday Texans and recycle them responsibly and for free.
Wow.
Yeah. So keeping
That's
that bulky stuff.
quite,
Yeah.
yeah, quite an accomplishment that you were a part
Uh,
of.
Yeah, and so that keeps all that bulky toxic material out of our landfills, which a good chunk of the time is taxpayer owned. So we didn't want Texans to be paying to clean up the bill or clean up the mess of corporations that were allowing dumping into our landfills. And this stuff is really toxic, lead, mercury, arsenic. So it doesn't belong in landfills. It needs to be recycled properly. But we repeated that victory in 2011. We got the Texas television take back law passed, and we worked with Panasonic, and we got a 90% passage rate on that as well. And so we have this precedent now for laws that are rooted in extended producer responsibility, where the manufacturers are responsible, not Texans, not local governments either. And so, we went on to pass 4 local recycling ordinances here in Austin for like business recycling and curbside composting for residents to get them that third cart, in pairing it up with their trash and recycling bins. So, several of those. And then I was driving home from work one day. I thought to myself, I was just waiting for the light to turn green so I could turn into my neighborhood. And then something just shot through me like a bolt of lightning. It stiffened my spine. I sat straight up and I said, Stacy, you need to start a business. I had no idea where this epiphany came from. The universe was shining on me that day. So I, the very next day, I went down to the Travis County Courthouse and I dropped my $17 and I got my DBA. Had no idea what I was doing, but it was all intuition based. I just went with my gut. I was like, the haulers of trash, recycling, composting, the lawmakers, their aides, the council members, the county commissioners, all these environmental heavy hitters across the state in the nonprofit world. Like, why aren't you the hub for environmental resources, zero waste strategies, and education? And so that's exactly what I did. And so with zero business ownership experience whatsoever, I just went for it. And, here we are 12 years later, coming full circle because Dell and the city of Austin are both my clients. So we've got some pretty big names that we've worked with, like Apple and AT&T, Nestle, but also some very small companies as well. But I'm so glad we're having this conversation about school districts and what schools can do, because this is the ultimate starting point of getting this kind of activity in schools and helping kids lead the way.
Wow. So we have a large following of leaders across our state and across the nation that'll be listening to this. And
Awesome.
so when you talked about why you believe now it's time for schools to take zero waste seriously, like tell us about that. Like what is your vision for that? And if someone's listening right now, what would you say to them?
Well, I think it's something that's entirely controllable, is how much waste you put out, say at the back dumpsters, at each location, at each school location. And waste is a cost that you can control. So reducing your trash pickups, introducing composting, that can really save the district thousands of dollars annually. And that money can be put into more student programs, or even, teacher benefit programs as well. And so there's a lot around, just starting very small to build that visibility and get habit change going. Maybe you just compost a short-term pilot program for composting in the cafeteria, or launch like a student-led waste audit. Those are really fun, where your students, of course, with supervision, get dressed up in their gloves and their goggles, and they've got tongs, and they've got booties on their slippers on their feet and to protect their shoes. And you get elbow deep into the waste stream, and you start picking out what belongs in the trash, what should have gone in the recycling bin, what could have been composted for food waste if we had a composting system. So you kind of get the composition and all the percentages of what could have been diverted from landfill. And then you take that number and you compare it to your hauler agreement, right? The companies that come and pick up those dumpsters and get that waste off your property. You compare it to, how much you could have diverted and how much that actually could relate or exchange into cost savings throughout the month or even the years. So you can do a very rudimentary on-site waste audit to get your very, very baseline measurements. It's pretty simple, and my company has done a gazillion waste audits. In fact, we have one scheduled for a company in downtown Austin on Friday. So we're going to be up to our elbows for, however long it takes to get through that sample of waste, so we can figure out what's going into the landfill trash and what should not be going into the landfill trash based on, the types of programs that they have. And
So you talked about a waste audit. Do you have a resource or some place that a leader or a principal could go to that, like, hey, this would be one quick way to get started, and here are the directions on doing it?
so you can check zwia.org. It's the Zero Waste International Alliance, zwia.org. And Zwia is kind of the one-stop shop for businesses and for municipalities as well, and even nonprofit organizations. So you
I
can,
wish I'd known about that when I was principal. When my students were asking me, I had no idea where to go.
yeah,
So how cool is that you're sharing
yeah.
this resource?
And I have resources on my website as well for that type of thing. And I've got time lapse videos of, we did a waste audit, at the campus of a tech giant, one of the top 5 tech giants up in North Austin. And we did a waste audit. And we were able to pull like 12 hours worth of waste auditing down into like a 30-second video. It's really cool to see the waste, pile up and then shrink down, pile up and shrink down, and go through all the samples, and just a lot of busy movement. But yeah, it does take that initial measurement to really understand where you're at and then where you could go. But also, administrations should think beyond recycling. Recycling is the bottom or the third R for a reason in your reduce, reuse, recycle pyramid. So reducing waste and reusing items that you already have on hand are the top key ways to keep waste out of landfill. So recycling is just a last resort. We really need to think about what's further up the stream or up the chain, and think about, recycling as just kind of the most convenient way that most people would like to divert their waste. But there's many ways to do so upstream that don't cost a penny.
What do you feel like is the biggest or most misconception about waste in institutions like schools?
I think the common misconception is that schools often don't think of waste, that in reality, waste includes surplus food, outdated electronics, excessive packaging,
Hmm.
cafeteria supply chains, even over purchasing supplies. And so, many,
Copy. I think of copies, like the copy machine. I would have teachers that my secretary would go crazy because there would be stacks that people would leave and they're just being recycled. I mean, there was money going out the door in a lot
yeah,
of ways there.
yeah. And, many administrators assume recycling alone is
Mm.
doing enough, but recycling is reactive. Zero waste as a full system is proactive because it focuses on reducing waste at the source, which cuts your administrative costs. And so waste is really a controllable expense that schools can actively reduce, but they often overlook. So tackling waste isn't just about sustainability, it's about your leadership, financial responsibility, and preparing your students to be responsible global citizens. This is about setting the kind of school culture, if you will.